On a misty November morning in 1986, a freight train carrying what looked like a routine load of consumer electronics derailed near an industrial suburb of Chicago. Cars piled on their sides, boxes spilled everywhere. The official story? A tragic accident. But beneath the twisted steel lay an $8 million theft and a carefully staged crime that was nearly impossible to detect. In early November 1986, Union Pacific freight train number 2910 left Chicago's Proviso yard loaded with nearly 200 tons of microchips, circuit boards, and high-value consumer electronics bound for East Coast distributors. Among the cargo were crates clearly labeled Sanyo, Panasonic, and Sony, worth millions. Week before the derailment, two experienced track inspectors, both union members, reported damaged ties and loose fasteners on the siding near Oak Brook. Their supervisor marked it as urgent, but maintenance crews were delayed. Unusual coincidence, maybe. On November 12th at approximately 2:30 a.m., as the train approached the troubled section, 5 cars suddenly left the track. The freight locomotive, number 2910, came to rest upright, but cars number 7 through 11 jackknifed, spilling into the embankment. Immediate casualties? None, but the scene was chaotic. Crushed electronics, shattered shipping containers, and a hazardous mess. Initial official reports blamed poor track maintenance. The derailment made headlines in local papers, which featured photos of crushed electronics and workers sweeping up debris. On the surface, it was clearly an accident. But then something odd happened. Exactly 8 weeks later, the same electronics, still packaged, unused, began to surface across the East Coast in auction houses, electronics markets, and even in small stores in New Jersey and Brooklyn. These goods carried shipping labels matching those lost in the derailment. An internal insurance audit triggered alert flags. Serial numbers matched the missing crates from train number 2910. Yet law enforcement had no suspects, no arrests. The cargo value exceeded $8 million, and insurance paid out. Victims were distributors, but most lost their claims. How could that much high-end electronics be recovered so easily in bulk? Enter Agent Marta Alvarez of the FBI Chicago Field Office, newly assigned to the Northeastern Financial Crimes Division. Reading the audit, she smelled something foul. One lead, a recovered invoice, pointed to a warehouse in Edison, New Jersey. In December, Alvarez obtained a search warrant. At the warehouse, she found neatly stacked crates marked Chicago, November 1986, and Union Pacific 2910. On the crate lids, modest price tags, about 20% of wholesale. The electronics were genuine, untouched. The paperwork looked forged. The warehouse manager insisted he bought them from a reliable source, dropping off goods after the accident. Alvarez pressed further. Surveillance showed the warehouse was frequently visited by a fleet of unmarked panel vans. Arriving late at night, the driver would hand over the sealed crates, count cash from plain envelopes, then leave. No records, no invoices. Investigators traced van rentals back to a shell company, Midway Logistics LLC. But ownership records tied it to Antonio Tony Rizzo Lombardo, a mid-level mafioso operating out of Cicero who had a reputation for railroad bribes. Rough surveillance photos placed Lombardo with known associates near the derailed site 2 days before the crash, which contradicted the official narrative that maintenance was on schedule. Phone records showed he and a local track supervisor exchanged calls in the hours before the incident. Then came the smoking gun, a testimony from Frankie the Wrench Caruso, a small-time thug whom Lombardo had sent to local tracks to loosen rail fasteners, making a derailment possible. Caruso had turned state witness after being arrested on unrelated charges. He described arriving at midnight, prying tie bolts and leaking grease around bolts so that the train would slip. He left before dawn, train passed later, cars derailed, the cargo heist began. Federal agents intercepted secret recording of Lombardo celebrating in a Cicero backroom. The tracks did their job. The goods rolled into our hands. Depot 8 mil. By March, indictments were issued. 20 individuals, including Lombardo, 2 track workers, warehouse operators in New Jersey, and corrupt union contacts. Charges included interstate cargo theft, mail fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy. The DOJ filed forfeiture claims on remaining inventory. Hundreds of crates were seized in multiple states. Courtroom testimony revealed how the derailment was stage-managed. Track saboteurs masked as inspectors, rigged fasteners, hidden cameras planted by the thieves to watch train movements, and a sleeper cell of Mafia operators ready to handle the goods. The train itself was cleared, only specific cars derailed. Local maintenance crews were given fraudulent work orders to appear to repair hazards as a cover-up. At trial, Lombardo attempted to claim innocence, saying he thought he was backing a labor protest aware of track safety issues. But juries didn't buy it. The conspiracy was too intricate. Senior union officials and railroad staff testified they were pressured to stay quiet. Sentences ranged from 5 to 30 years for key players. Lombardo was sentenced to 27 years in federal prison. Several corrupt supervisors and warehouse managers received convictions. Insurance restitution paid most victims, but the heist remained one of the boldest railroad crimes in U.S. history. Why it matters? It exposed how vulnerable supply chains and corporate logistics could be manipulated by organized crime. It revealed collusion between Mafia operatives and railway insiders, a covert partnership rarely suspected. It showed investigative courage, how persistent work across state lines by one agent cracked a case once written off as an accident. As the court closed its final panel, Agent Alvarez quietly removed her badge and reflected, "They stole more than cargo that night. They stole faith in the system." Today, rail security protocols nationwide include frequency checking devices, cargo tracking, and mandatory spot audits. But even now, when a freight train rumbles past you in the dead of night, consider this: sometimes the crash isn't the accident, it's the crime.